Howdy, folks, and welcome to another Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host, Luke, the Ginger Bookworm. Today's going to be a good one. Today's going to be quite an interesting one. I thought I would delve into the nostalgic side of myself and of the podcast, and focus on a topic that means a lot to me. It's something that I'm very passionate about, something I have a lot of experience in, and it's something that I've been doing on and off for oh god past 3-4 years now. So without further ado, the topic for today, if you've read the title, you probably already know what the topic is. But if you haven't read the title, you just jumped in. Thank you for jumping into the deep end. For those of you that jumped in and read the title at the same time, today's topic is backwards, backwards compatibility and game preservation. Um, it's a topic that, like I said, it means a lot to me. Now, for most of you, you probably won't know what that means or what that is, which is completely fine. If you're not a gamer, that's understandable that you don't know. So I'll give you a quick sort of heads up of what backwards compatibility and game preservation is. So backwards compatibility is quite simple. It's the idea and concept that if you have a console, whether it be Xbox or PlayStation, that you'd be able to get a game that, say for example, you've got the brand new Xbox, the Xbox Series X, and you've got an Xbox 360. The idea and concept is that you can get a 360 game, which is about 3 to 4 generations behind, stick it into your brand new top of the range console, and it would play as it probably, well, I was going to say as new, but probably a bit better on the newer consoles. But that's the idea of backwards compatibility, that you could go to the shops, buy an old game, stick it into your new console, and it would work as if that console was a 360 or was a PlayStation 3. That's the basic premise of backwards compatibility. Game preservation, it's the exact same thing, a little bit different. The idea and concept behind that one is when you have art, when you go to a museum and then you see all the different types of paintings, and these paintings are range from the 20th century, 19th, 18th, 17th century, Leonardo da Vinci, Picasso, stuff like that. They're all works of art, they're all worth a lot of money, and the idea of a museum is to preserve them, is to make sure they last longer than what they would do if they were just sort of thrown up anywhere in somebody's house. It's the idea of keeping that history, keeping it alive, so that people and generations to come can experience it, even though that the painter, the designer, is long since deceased. And that's the idea of game preservation. It's getting games that are like from the original Xbox or the original PlayStation and being able to, not let them die, keep the memories alive and still being able to play the first Halo on the new Xbox, being able to play. I don't know if this actually does work or not, but the idea of being able to get Killzone for the PlayStation, I think PlayStation 2, I think it was, and being able to play that on your PlayStation 5. I don't know if you can on that front. I know you can play the original Halo on the new Xbox, but that's what's the idea and the concept behind backwards compatibility and game preservation. It's just making sure that these games last forever, that different generations can come along and experience them like I did. Like when I was growing up with these games, they were brand new, they were visionary, they were breaking the boundaries of what gaming could be. And then you've got my little brother who's coming along now, and he's playing all my old games and having my experiences, but brand new, fresh, as if these games had just come out, and loving them, and really sharing the love that goes into making games, because creating video games is very hard. Take it from me doing 4 years of it. It's not easy. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of love that goes into creating video games. A lot of time, because a lot of people kind of just think, oh, video games, oh, they're easy. There's not much. But like, to be honest, the industry has grown quite a lot over the many decades. I feel like it was around about the early to middle 2000s is when the gaming started to be taken seriously, that it was starting to be seen as something that was actually profitable and viable. They've always been profitable, but it wasn't until like, the PlayStation 2, Xbox and stuff like that, especially Xbox. When Xbox and Microsoft came into the game, they really sort of commercialized and made gaming a celebrity thing. You know, if you've watched the documentary on I think it's a YouTube. I think if you go onto YouTube and type in Xbox and go to Xbox's YouTube account, there is a documentary about 6 or 7 part documentary about the idea of how Xbox started and how Microsoft got into actually doing consoles, and it takes you through the original Xbox, the 360, and the PlayStation and the Xbox One, not PlayStation. There's no cross. It's a very interesting documentary, very fascinating. It's about an hour each. And it just shows you how they sort of commercialized it, how they put gaming into the mainstream, they put gaming into movies, they put it into had celebrity endorsements, made sure that it was constantly on the brain of everybody. Like, gaming is to be taken seriously. Gaming is not something that's just done by nerds. Gaming can be for everybody. It can be for your granddad. It could be for your little brother. Be for your sister. Be for your mother. Your dad. It could be for everybody. Not just really like nerds standing around in an arcade um, for hours on end playing Pac-Man. So they really made it mainstream. And with that, came the video game boom, and what is where we are now is how video games are a multi-billion-dollar industry, making tons and tons of money every year. Mobile gaming, like for example, Call of Duty Warzone on the um, mobile is like makes $1 billion a year. You know, Candy Crush by King, I'm sure they make billions and billions and billions of money. Currently, the most money being made, sadly, I hate to admit it, is in mobile gaming. That's where the majority of the money is, sadly. But the point is, I'm trying to make. Sorry about that. I had to quickly pause and carry on because my dogs came in and they jumped all over me. So where was I? Right, that was it. So the point is I'm trying to make is that gaming is on the rise, and with being on the rise brings more talent, brings in more creativity, more younger minds, more people to come in to say, you know what, this is what works, but we're going to try this. We're going to try new creative features. We're going to try new ways of telling a story. And with that, came especially around the around the PlayStation 2 till I would say the Xbox 360 generations, between that time frame from beginning to end, the creativity just was off the scale with the amount of video games that were being brought out. Like, so many were coming out that even now when I go into like used video game stores, I'm just amazed how much variety and different types of games they were. Like, for example, Mad Dash, a very, very deep cut, very old game for the original Xbox. Mad Dash was a video game where you have a collection of weird characters, monsters, humans. There was like I'm sure there was a rat or a squirrel that was like in a straitjacket that looked like he was hyped, like he was just insane, but really mad collection of characters. And it was just a racing game. You ran from A to B, the fastest as possible for all the other characters. And when I say racing, I don't mean like driving. Like, it was actual running. They ran, used their legs. Again, it was very weird, very surreal sort of game. But again, this was just a thing of like, well, we don't know what will stick, so we'll just throw everything at the wall. I have quite fond memories of Mad Dash. Would I like a remaster? A re- Maybe, probably not a remake. It doesn't. I don't think it needs a remake. I don't think it would, work that much in today's market. But a remaster would be nice. Upgrade graphics, because the character designs were really fascinating. The music was incredible, and the world, like the biomes that you ran in, were just really, really great. And inventive. And as a young kid, seeing this was amazing. Like, I remember playing Jet Set Radio. My sister had it on the Dreamcast. I remember playing it on the Dreamcast and loving it. And then we got an Xbox, and it came with the Xbox. And I remember playing Jet Set Radio, and obviously with the Xbox being more powerful than the Dreamcast, you had a higher rate of graphics. It wasn't great, it's not as good as modern standards, but for the time it was, cutting edge. And I remember playing this and going, God, this looks so much better. And just, again, when I was younger, back when these games came out, like, I never played them like they were meant to be played. I just played them as any young child would. I'd mess around. I wouldn't do the missions. I would just skate around, or I would just shoot people just because I could, you know. So with this boom and with this creativity and seeing what sticks, there was so many different games out there that it was hard to keep up. And one thing that I found that with as the generations have gone on and how creators have changed and how the business has changed, that you tend to see less and less creativity. You tend to see less and less games. Like many times, if you know me in person, or if you've spoken to me ever about video games, one thing I always say whenever I go into a video game store is simply, there's not much variety. I prefer the 360 days. I prefer the PlayStation days, because if you go into any, especially if you go into like pre-owned game stores and you look at like the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and you look at the amount of games, well, there's a good amount of games over that generation. But then if you would ever to move yourself over and look at the amount of games in the PlayStation section or in the Xbox section, and you just look there, you will notice that there is a lot more games there. And you could go through, and there's more than likely there'll be games that you've never heard of, that you've never seen before ever, and you've got to be like, oh God, I don't remember this game. Don't remember this game ever coming out, and that's something that I've had many, many times. And which what got me into, as I will talk on in a minute, what got me into collecting older games, especially 360 games, and what kind of what's the word I'm looking for, kind of inspired me to do this topic today, to talk about backwards compatibility and why it's so important to have games that are backwards compatible, and why game preservation is so important. So, without further ado, let's go on to the next segment. It's a bit of a story. I'm going to tell a tale, tell a story. So if you're still listening, if you're still interested, sit back, relax, get some hot chocolate, and listen to the next segment. I'm going to take you on a bit of a tale, a bit of a story. So today's tale, today's story, if you're still here, if you're still interested, thank you for sticking around. If you haven't, well, you're not here to hear it, so it doesn't really matter. But those of you that are still here, today's tale, today's story that I'm going to tell, revolves around the Xbox 360. Many times I've explained, from if you've listened to the other episodes of the podcast, all the other video game consoles that I've owned or played on or used. There's many I haven't mentioned, like the PSP and the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, DS, DS XL, many handhelds, the PSP Vita, which was incredibly underrated. But today I'm going to focus on the 360, because I spent majority of my gaming youth, shall I say, I'm still young, but my gaming youth, my gaming years, on the 360, because up until that point, before I got a 360, I was still using the Xbox original, and my dad had a 360. But again, it was his, so like I only got to play on it a bit. I played Call of Duty and Gears of War on it, but I didn't really have my own until I think it was the Xbox came out 2005, 2006. I think I got one 2007. Yeah, yeah, because the reason I remember that is because I'm sure the Simpsons movie came out in 2007, and I got I wanted the Simpsons Xbox, if I'm being honest. But no, I got a standard white Xbox with the Simpsons game for the 360, which again is another underrated game, which I don't know if I'd be able to talk about it for an hour, but generally that's another game that I'd love to get into, about how underrated it is. It's such a joy to play, and you wouldn't think it from a movie tie-in game, but generally, as The Simpsons, it's probably one of the best Simpsons games I've played. Well, not the best. Simpsons Hit and Run is the best, and then probably The Simpsons video game is underneath that. Anyway, as I was saying, I've spent majority of my time playing the 360. I delved so many hours into it. I played the Gears of War. I played Halo. God, there's so many different games. I'm just trying to look around my room, trying to look for inspiration. I experienced Mass Effect for the first time on that series. I literally cried my eyes out. You know, I followed the 360 basically from its conception with the Red Ring of Death to its inevitable end, put into the grave for the Xbox One came out. I didn't get an Xbox One until a bit later on because, oh well, I won't get into it, but the Xbox One had a lot of issues at launch, so I didn't upgrade straight away. But that being said, I loved my time with the Xbox 360. I enjoyed the games on it. I enjoyed the I don't know. It just felt next gen. I my dad had a PlayStation 3. I used to play the PlayStation 3. I didn't like the layout. I didn't like how it looked. I didn't like the feel of it. I didn't like the controllers. I preferred the feel of the controller in the Xbox 360 controller in my hands. I just liked the UI was just better and easier, and the games I found for me personally were just more fun and more interesting. So, like I said, I just delved so much time into it. But I was growing up, and with growing up, you know, in me personally growing up, didn't really have a lot in the way of pocket money. I think I've mentioned this before. Didn't really have much in the way of pocket money. It was quite rare, so it was like probably once a month, or maybe once every other month that we would go down to Blockbuster or Choices or Game Station or Game. I'm naming a lot of old places that are no longer around in the UK or nowhere around in the world. I don't think there's anywhere where Blockbusters are around anymore. But we used to go down to these places to get video games, maybe once or maybe once every other month, and to pick a game out. The issue with that was that there's so many games to choose from that I only had a pick of one out of all these different games. So as you can probably imagine, being a young kid, I chose the most popular ones. So like GTA, Mass Effect, Far Cry 3, Halo. I'm trying to the trying to remember what it was called now. Singularity. That wasn't quite popular. That was underrated, if I'm being completely honest. Um, Halo ODST. There's so many different like I'm always coming back to the same games because generally there's so many 360 games out there, and I played so many over the years that I'm just trying to remember them all, and it's a complete nightmare. Um, so with so much to choose from, from Bioshock to Dark Souls to Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, so many different games to choose from. Generally, it was like the idea of being told pick one was a nightmare to choose. So what that meant was that I missed out on a lot of classics. I missed out on a lot of games growing up. I had friends who had pocket money who were able to go to the sort of video games shops and get multiple games at once. Me, it was like it happened, but again, it did always happen. So, I learned to cherish the games I had. I learned to go in and play them as much as possible, complete them as much as possible, basically get as many achievements on them as possible, which I think where my love and my addiction or obsession, better word to use, for um, achievement hunting came from, because I'm a big achievement hunter now. Like, I love to collect achievements. It's again up there with one of my biggest gaming hobbies, of just getting a new game and being like, okay, I'll play for the campaign and I'll play for the different difficulties and I'll try to do all the challenges and just see how many achievements or how much gamer score I can accumulate before I die, basically. Um, so coming back to the story, growing up, only playing the most popular games, missing out on loads of the classics, meant that I felt like, especially now, even though it helped me kind of learn to become a achievement hunter, I just feel like missing out on these many classics kind of was a bit of a bummer, a bit of a sad moment. Which again, it wasn't one of those things at the time that incredibly bothered me because I was just appreciative to be able to play something. But as an adult, now I have adult money. The idea of being able to go out and experience these new games, because they are technically brand new to me, games that I missed out on, is a real treat. For example, like Dead Space. I always wanted to play Dead Space when I was younger. I remember playing the demo of the first Dead Space, scared me shitless, and I was like, I don't want to play that, which is a shame because I've say recently, about 2-3 years ago, I went out and bought all 3 Dead Space games. Luckily, they were backwards compatible on the Xbox One, and I was able to play all 3 Dead Space games, and I fell in love with them. I love that series so much so that I'm currently looking into getting the books and reading the background lore of the world, as well as I know that there's a Dead Space. They're making a remake of the first Dead Space, as well as there's another company, I think of ex Visceral Game Studios, the studio that made Dead Space. Ex employees of that studio have come together to start their own Dead Space type game. Um, so I'm looking forward to those type of games coming back, especially in next gen, being more scary, being more bloody, brutal. But again, that was an example of a game that I missed out on growing up that I've been able to go back to now and experience and enjoy and just find love in, and have a brand new passion for. So that is my story, and the reason why I'm telling you this story is to kind of help explain the next segment, the part that comes next, the idea behind Game Pass and what Xbox are doing to help preserve games, and the reason why I'm so excited, and the reason why this topic is means so much to me, and why I wanted to talk about it. So that's my story. The quick points before we move on is that growing up, spent most of my time on the Xbox 360. Didn't get a chance to get by any of the random games because I wasn't really sure how long they were going to be, or if they're going to be good or not. So I always took the safe route and got the bigger popular games like Call of Duty and so on and so forth, which meant that I missed out on a lot of classics, which means that now as an adult, I got adult money and I'm able to go out and buy these games that I missed out on. Now, moving on to the next segment about what Xbox are doing with Game Pass. Now, if you're a gaming fan or not, there's a high potentiality that somewhere or another you've heard of Game Pass. You've heard of what Game Pass is or how it works. For those that haven't, Game Pass is a system that was set up by Xbox. The basic idea, the basic premise of it, it's a subscription service that you pay for. And what that does, that allows you access to a trove of about 100 plus games on your Xbox for free. Obviously, not for free, you got to pay a subscription. But the idea behind it is that you get all these games for free. You get day one games, like for example, Halo Infinite. That was released day one that the game came out. Instead of going out and paying £60 for the game, you just get the game for free. You can download it without even having to pay anything for it. So if you think about it, you're paying £10 a month, but you're getting games that are worth 60 to £70 brand new for technically for free, and you can play them and you can download them whenever you want. If you think about it, it's a done deal. It's a good deal. It's a great deal. It's probably one of the best deals in gaming going. Now, I'm not here to hype that up. I'm not here to basically brown nose Xbox. Even though I am an Xbox fan, that's not what this episode's about. What's podcast about? It's not me here doing that. The reason I'm bringing up Game Pass is that what it means, not just for gaming, but backwards compatibility and game preservation. One thing I love about Game Pass is that, as well as putting the brand new games, the games that you know of, like Alien Isolation, brand new games like Among Us, The Ascent, Back for Blood. I'm currently going down the list of the games on here, like the brand new not the brand new Battlefield, but like Battlefield 5, Battletoads, stuff like that. As well as adding in the newer sort of games, they also add in the older stuff. Like, for example, I'm currently looking at Blinks the Time Sweeper from the original Xbox. Again, underrated classic. A game that my sister had that I played, which I never really played properly. I messed around in it, but that's at the point. The point is, I can now play it on my Xbox. Black, which was a game about it was one of the most cutting edge FPS shooters of the day. Being able to play that again. Brutal Legend, again, another fantastic game with Jack Black. I have so many good memories of playing Brutal Legend, growing up playing that could be in its own video on its own. All the Crisis, from Crisis 1 to Crisis 3. I still haven't played Crisis 1. I've played a little bit of Crisis 3. I really need to get around to playing Crisis 2, if I'm being completely honest. Um, the point is, I could go down this list for ages and ages and ages, and just pinpoint of like Dante's Inferno, another Xbox game, all the Dead Space games, being able to play the original Dooms, being able to play Dragon Age 1 and 2, as well as the brand new Dragon Age Inquisition, being able to play Morrowind, being able to play Oblivion, being able to play Fable 1, Fable 2, Fable 3, planning to play Fallout New Vegas. The list could go on about the amount of Xbox 360 games that are on here that majority of people either haven't heard of or haven't played. And me, I feel why it's so important to have this and why it's so great the way Xbox is doing is because of Phil Spencer, the head of gaming at Xbox. Phil Spencer basically came out and said, I think quite recently actually, around about last year, he said that he wants to make sure that games are preserved for as long as possible, that make sure that games and backwards compatibility last the test of time. So when like in 20 years time, when the Xbox 720 XP90, comes out, whatever it's called, you know, I could still get a game from the 360 days. I could get an Xbox One game that's 20 years old, and I could stick it into the brand new Xbox or whatever it is in the future, and it would work seamlessly, as if like no time had gone by at all, like as if the game was created yesterday. You know, um, and this is great. This is great for not just the industry, but for gaming in general. Because, like I said, there's so many people out there who haven't experienced these games, or children like myself when I was younger, who couldn't experience these games either through money or not being able to go to have people who would you be able to borrow them off, or they'd have people that you could experience them with. Now you're an adult, you can go back and you can experience them. Like I've spoke to many people who've never played Fable, and they always say like, go back if you've got Xbox, if you've got Game Pass, get it down and play through the Fable 1, 2 and 3. All fantastic games. I have so many fond memories playing Fable 1 and Fable 2. um, it makes me really not emotional but really overjoyed to know that people can go back and play these games. One of the things that I love about Xbox as well, which again I'm going to bring out my fanboy side of it, but a couple of years ago Xbox announced their backwards compatibility idea and concept. The basic premise of it, as I explained at the beginning, was that bringing back as many classics to the Xbox as possible. I think last November, I think it was, that they announced the final batch of backwards compatible games. There's about 70 of them in total, from the range of like the Fear to not Mad Max, Max Payne, all the Max Payne games, SpongeBob, Last Airbender. Oh god, there was so many. The point is they released about 76 games. The sad part about it was that once they released these games, they basically said that we can't release any more backwards compatible games. We have reached the limit that we can produce these games for the new Xbox, and that we can make them run, and that we can sort of put onto the new Xbox because of licensing agreements, or that these older games have codes been lost. Because going back a bit, what you kind of have to try to remember is that back in the beginnings of gaming, back when gaming started to have its boom, around the original Xbox, PlayStation 2 sort of days, was that gaming wasn't as big as it is today, as I explained, and that gaming wasn't a thing of like, oh, we need to look after this game, like this game we've just made, we need to make sure we look after it. What you'll find is that you'll say, for example, a game would be made, and then another game and another game would probably be made, and then the hard drive or whatever storage spaces they were using, server space, was full. So what they'd end up doing is like, well, we've got no room left for this new game that we want to create, so we're just going to have to delete an older game. So what you'll find is the oldest game that is no longer supported would probably end up getting deleted, which means all the assets, all the code, the engine, more than likely is gone. So what that means for nowadays, for the future, for the preservation, was that if you wanted to go back and be like, oh, I want, for example, Jet Set Radio, I want to take that game and I want to make sure it runs at a good 30 to 60 frames per second on, say, the brand new Xbox. And then Sega comes, well, we can't do that because the studio that has it either does no longer has the rights to the music or no longer has the rights to the IP. Or, back in the day, we didn't have enough space in the server room, so we just deleted the game and basically all its assets off our servers, and we didn't store any backups. So that game is now lost. So the only way to experience it is on the older consoles, and that does happen. It happens quite frequently. It happens quite a lot, and I'm sure it probably happens, probably not as much today, because we have a lot more space and we have the cloud and we have other places to store data. But back in the day, it happened quite frequently. Like if a game got to a point where it wasn't popular, or it was old and it was no longer being used, then they would probably just like scavenge whatever assets they could from it, and then the rest would just be deleted or copied over. It happened a lot. It was a very frequent thing that happened. What this means is, though, again, like I said, if you wanted to come back and remaster it, you wanted to do something with it so it worked on the newer consoles, it'd be lost. You can't do it as well. You also have the issue with rights, because obviously Jet Set Radio had a lot of music in it, and if they no longer have the rights to use that music, then they can't publish the game without it. That's been the issue for majority of games. Like, for example, I really really liked I really like the Transformers games. But the issue is that High Moon Studios that made those games no longer has the license rights to make Transformers games, meaning that if they wanted to make those games work on newer consoles, they couldn't do it because they no longer have the licensing for it. And this is the issue. It's the idea of that licenses don't last very long, and that a lot of old companies just deleted the games because the games weren't successful. So, meaning that you can still play these games if you've got the disc of them, but you can't keep playing them on newer hardware, on newer software, which is a shame, which is the downside of gaming. And it's sad because you have to leave all those memories behind. You have to leave all those good times behind and move on, really. And the idea of knowing that you could still play it on your new console, but what's stopping it is because of licensing agreements, or that the game's been deleted, that it no longer exists digitally anywhere, is incredibly sad. Is incredibly disheartening as a gamer. It's a shame that you can't go back. And this is where Phil Spencer comes in. Phil Spencer basically says that this also is a travesty, that is a very sad thing about gaming. Again, he's a hardcore gamer. He, like me and like all the other gamers, wants to play these games, but knows that they can't unless they go back a generation or two to play them. Which is all fair enough. You can do it. I'm sure you can go back and get a 360 original Xbox for quite cheap, but it's not the point. It's not the principle. The principle is that if you have the ability to, you should be able to. So what Phil Spencer basically said, he goes, if I remember correctly, I might be paraphrasing. He basically said that he wants to make sure that any game that's made now for the Xbox Series X and for the Xbox One, any game that's made right now will be future-proofed. That they will work. They will work on every console moving forwards. So if I got, like, for example, Forza Horizon 5. If I got Forza Horizon 5 and then 20 years down the line, I stick it in the brand new Xbox, it will work, like I say, practically brand new. That it's preserved, that the code will be saved somewhere, that it'll be stored in the cloud, that the game software will have something in it where it will be have the ability to work elsewhere. They have the ability to function, as well as it did on the newer consoles. So that's what Xbox is doing. They're trying their best to make sure that games that are made now are preserved and are looked after. Because at the end of the day, gaming is art. There's no other way you can put it. Gaming is art, and the older a game is, the more cherished a game is, the more respected it is for what it was, for what it did, for what it tried to do. We all look at Pong now. Like, Pong is a very basic game, but we all look at it quite fondly of like, well, that's where it started. That was the beginning. It's art. We need to look after punk. Pac-Man, it's old, but it's still quite loved today. Mario, old, still quite loved today. Same with Sonic. It's because us as gamers, we've wanted to keep that series alive. We wanted to keep those characters alive. We want to keep our memories alive. And it's the same with the actual games themselves. We want to make sure that we can be able to play them, that our kids can play them, their kids can play them. Not needing to having to keep an old dusty Xbox or Xbox 360, hidden away in the loft and be like, okay, the grandkids are coming around. I'm going to bring down the old antique Xbox 360 down, and the grandkids can play that. I was like, well, no, in all fairness, you can do that, and you could probably make some really nice memories of doing that. But just having the idea that you can have your brand new console, but just keep the disc and just be like, oh, let's put the disc in. Oh, I can buy this old game for 50p from the shop that I remember paying 35 quid for when it first came out, and just being able to be like, yeah, go ahead, experience it, play it, enjoy it, experience Mass Effect, experience Gears of War, experience, well, probably not Dark Souls. The kids will probably cry if they play Dark Souls, but the point is just go forth and prospect, go forth and experience. I don't know what PlayStation is doing on the terms of this. I haven't really heard much in the idea of PlayStation doing anything about backwards compatibility. The last thing I heard about PlayStation was that PlayStation were looking towards the future. They were looking ahead, so that they weren't looking in backwards compatibility more to the fact of, well, why should we look back when we have so much that we want to do in the future? Which again, I understand, I get it, but I just feel like that's a very anti gaming industry, very anti art, really, very much like, well, why should we look at the Mona Lisa? It's just a painting, when we've got brand new artists nowadays making bigger and better things. I'm like, well, yeah, fair enough, but it's the Mona Lisa. You know what I mean? That's like saying, oh, Halo was great, but we've just bought out Halo Infinite, so why should we care about Halo 2? Well, because Halo 2 was amazing, and that everybody should be able to experience Halo 2, you know? Uh, so again, another reason why I love Xbox, because they currently Xbox, and I think I've said this before in a prior episode. Xbox is pro consumer. Xbox is pro gamer. They're here for the gamer. They're here to basically say, here's the games that you brand new, and here's the games that you love. You know, play them, experience them on the Xbox. If you have the disc, just stick it in. If you want to buy it digitally, you can buy it digitally. But if you have the disc, stick it in and enjoy. That's it. Done. And the idea of that really makes me smile. The idea that I could get Max Payne 3, stick it into the console, and just play it like if I was on the 360. Especially when you stick the 360 games into the Xbox, it comes up with the original 360 loading screen, and the sounds of it, and just it's weird. Again, the nostalgia of just playing on the 360, and just the enjoyment I got from playing and on the 360. The 360 holds a special place in my heart. Of all the consoles that I've had, I think the 360 was the changing point for me. It was where I basically decided where me as a gamer I want to go, where I wanted to go moving forward. I'm not saying that even though it doesn't seem like it, doesn't sound like it, I'm not an Xbox fanboy. I do love Xbox greatly, but I don't hate PlayStation. I'm not against PlayStation. I'm not a PlayStation shill. It's just more just the fact of um, I've had Xbox, I've had PlayStation. I just prefer Xbox. It's simple as that. You know, I support both. I support games on both. You know, I support the exclusives on both. I'm quite saddened that I don't have a PlayStation, that I can't play Spider-Man, for example. But at the same stage, I'm like, fair enough. I understand. Exclusivity promotes creativity. You need those exclusives to then another for the other opposing side to go, well, you've got, for example, you've got Spider-Man, we have Gears of War. But then again, I played all the Gears of Wars. I loved all Gears of Wars, but I still want to play Spider-Man because it's Spider-Man. But the point is still the same. Of like, it promotes, like, okay, you've got this, we've got that. It promotes creativity. Oh, you've done this brand new feature. Well, we've got this game with the same feature and more. You know, it just promotes the sort of inventiveness, which is what I was saying back in the day, where you look at 360 games and you look how many 360 games, look at how many PlayStation games they were. There were tons. They were so imaginative. And then you get to, you know, the Xbox One, and you get to the PlayStation 4 areas, and you realize that, you know, all that's there is the mainstream, the most popular. You know, you've got your Gears of Wars, you've got your Tomb Raiders, you've got your Halos, you know, you've got your racing games, you've got your Forza, stuff like that. And it's just like, oh, this is good, but, you know, where's the imaginativeness? And the problem is with that is the fact of going on to the next thing I'm going to say, it's a great segue, is that all those games, all those imaginative games got lost. Well, not lost. They've always been known. They've always been found. But what I'm try to explain is that these games were, instead of being put on a disc, they were just thrown digitally. So all the games that used to be just, every game was like, you've got to do a disc. You've got to do a disc. The problem is with doing a disc, it's very expensive to mass produce tons and tons of disc copies, as well as having to make the manuals and stuff like that, where it's just easier nowadays to make your game and then to publish it digitally. So all those imaginative games, all those creative games, all those games that, you know, that I was just, oh my god, I've never heard of this one before, and then just finding like a hidden gem, are all hidden on the Xbox store and in the ID of Xbox part of it, which is fine and all. But me as a fan, I love, you know, I'm an old soul. I love having a disc version of it. I like just being able to pull the disc out and being like, oh, I remember this game, and having like little bits of nostalgia instead of going through my list on Xbox and going through all the digital games I have. And then being like, oh yeah, I remember that one. You know, being able to, it's like having a book. You know, it's all good having a Kindle, but just have there's something different about holding a book in your hand and being able to smell it and being able to feel it, you know, in your hand. That's, you know, it's just a different experience, a different um, moment. It feels so much better. But that's the idea of what I'm trying to say about Xbox and Game Pass, is that they're all about preservation. That, you know, if either through Game Pass or just for free, you know, if you have the game and you can just stick it into your console and then it would work, you know, and that's what I love about, you know, this whole idea of game preservation. And it leads me on to my next topic, is what led me on to collecting old 360 games, games that I missed out growing up. So, without further ado, let's move on to that. So, moving on, as I've mentioned prior in this episode so far, that, you know, we've talked about the the topic about game backwards compatibility and game preservation. You know, my own history with Xbox 360 and playing games, Xbox and Game Pass, what they're doing to help, you know, preserve video games and make sure that everybody and anybody can experience them, and that, you know, new games that are being made today will be preserved so that they will last stand the test of time, which is all great and fantastic. Which then leads me on to my final point, to my final segment, where I talk about, you know, all of this accumulating as what led me to wanting to collect video games, what's led me wanting to experience the games that I missed on the 360, and being able to play them on my Xbox One. Not all of them. Some of the games I'm going to talk about are currently not backwards compatible and probably never will be, sadly, because of licensing agreements. But still, the same, the memories are there. So I'm going to try my best to hopefully convey more of the memories and the nostalgia as much as possible. Um, so without further ado, as I said, I'm a collector, and when they announced backwards compatibility, I was really excited because majority of the games that they announced originally I had and played, but I hadn't played them for so long that I went back and, you know, played them. You know, the idea like Cameo, for example. I remember having Cameo when that first come out for the original Xbox and being blown away by the graphics of it, and then being able to play it now, but on the 360 on the Xbox One, and it looks better. Like, it's still, don't get me wrong, it's still a 360 game. You know, it's still a game that has a few rough edges, and it was made for HD, not for 4K. But it still works fantastically. You know, everything's a lot more sharper, a lot more crisper, a lot more clearer. And it was just nicer to be able to play it again, having to relive those memories. But there were a lot of games on that list that I'd never played before, I'd never heard before. Um, And I was like, well, I'm an adult now. I have human money. Human money? Everybody has human money. I have adult money, and I can now, you know, go go forth and prosper, go forth and experience these games. And I did. I went for my renaissance, should I say? I rediscovered a lot of games I missed. For example, like I mentioned, Dead Space. Dead Space was incredible. I missed that the first time round. Played all the Dead Space games, loved them. I played Deadpool, which I missed the Deadpool games when they came out. Replaying that, thought it was again really, really charming and fantastically funny. I have, well, I don't know why they haven't decided to make a sequel. That game deserves a sequel, and I hope that now that Xbox has brought, well, hasn't brought them yet, are currently in the um, midst of acquiring Activision and all the studios under Activision, that High Moon Studios will be able to get the rights back to Deadpool, and I would just love a next gen Deadpool game. Army of Two, uh, I I'll be honest, I played it on my own because none of my friends who had it are willing to play. Well, I don't talk to a lot of my friends who had it back in the day, so I played it on my own. It's not really a game you want to play on your own. It is a game you want to play with friends because the AI is terrible. But it's going back and experience it, was fun. Hidden gems, for example, like Prey, going back and playing the original Prey. I was so looking forward to Prey 2. I really hoped and wished Prey 2 happened. I remember watching that when Prey 2 was being announced and we saw gameplay and we saw the E3 footage. I was so hyped, and then to find out the game was cancelled, really upsetting. And then Bethesda came out; they did a reboot of Prey, which I played, which it was all right, but I didn't like it as much as I liked the first Prey. But again, first Prey, hidden gem, played that, enjoyed it. Brand New Domain, that was another one. That was a game by Sega. It was that to us, Brand New Domain. I've played it quite recently. I replayed it because I knew I was going to do this topic, so I went back and replayed it quite recently. That game still looks good today. Like playing it on my Xbox, it still looks good today. It runs smooth. It actually probably runs smoother than it did. Um, the idea of Bonnie Domain, because again you might not have heard about it, is that you are a soldier being sent in to Japan because Japan's locked itself off from the rest of the world. It's set in the far, far future, like far, 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 far. I think like 2080. Um, and Japan are leading the world in robotics. That they have the most advanced robotic systems, but they're making what's called hollow children. And a hollow child is basically an android, a person that is a robot, but they don't know that they're a robot. That they've evolved and advanced enough where they don't know that they are robots, and then when they find out, they kind of freak out, kind of like Blade Runner. Uh, Best way to explain it. But when you fight these robots, one thing I love, and again, I don't know how they managed to do this on 360 hardware. Um, but when you shoot the robots, armor falls off. You shoot them in the leg, their armor falls off on the leg, and then you take a leg off, and they'll hop towards you. They'll keep shooting at you, but they'll hop towards you. You take both legs out, and they will crawl towards you. Kind of like Dead Space, where if you take the legs off, they're still going to keep coming. You have to take the legs off and then take the head off. And it's the same with this game. Is like I'm shooting the armor off. I'm spending loads of ammo taking the armor off on their legs, so they crawl towards me. Then I'm either having to run up to them and stand on their head to crush their skulls so that they stop moving, or I'm having to spend more ammo to shoot them in the head to make sure that they will stop crawling towards me. It's real Terminator stuff. Fantastic. Again, it's a game that I didn't experience for the 360, and going back now and playing New Domain as an adult, somebody who can appreciate it and enjoy it for what it is, and just being like, I can't believe I missed out on this game growing up. I can't believe that this was a game that I could have experienced, but I just didn't want to take that chance because I was just too worried, you know, that I had wasted my money, or my dad's money, if I'm being honest. Because that was always in the back of my mind, the idea of that I want to get a game, I want to get these different games, I want to get these different experimental sort of games, but I don't want to get it and it be crap. and I don't want to waste my dad's money by by doing it. So I always tried again. I always went for the safe option, and sometimes even with the safe option, you'd still get burnt. But at least then I went with the safer option, so it's not so bad. They're not all winners at the end of the day. Um, but one thing, like going back to one thing that I enjoy is like going back and having to replay these games. That like I said, you can just get that nostalgia back. You can get those feelings of like what games used to be, how games used to look, how games used to run. For example, I bought Beyond Good and Evil HD remaster that they did for the 360. Didn't play it for the original Xbox. I've only played a bit of it for the 360. And again, that's a world that even though I haven't completed it yet, I'm enjoying and that I want to see more. And that Ubisoft have hinted many times on and off, almost every other year, that they're working on it, that it's coming. I remember like a couple, I think it was like 2013, 2014, the E3 that they announced it, and then they were saying, "Oh, we made a remake," and they showed like not gameplay, but they showed like an animated sort of trailer, and then it came out, and it like that game still hasn't come out yet, and there's been no hints of it ever to come out. So I missed out on a lot growing up, but able to go back now and experience them is fantastic. One thing I want to do now is that I've got a few games in front of me that I've either recently bought or been playing, and that I want to just go through them with you. If I had a video, I'd love to do a full-on like box and complete um, section with you, like showing you the games and the cases and showing you the manuals, because I miss having a manual. I miss holding a manual in my hand. And even though I didn't entirely used to use them, I used to just like to jump into games and experience them myself. It's just nice how sometimes you'd get these manuals that would have like bits of lore in them, bits of story in them, or it'd give you an idea of what's going on. I'm looking at, for example, I've got a game at the moment in my hands, and they're telling it's only a short one. They used to be very much thicker than this one, but like it would give you a bit of the controls, then it would give you the story, different types of pickups, your heads-up display, what's on here, what they mean, the different things you can buy, the multiplayers, the customer characterization, the classes, stuff like that. And I miss just having a manual. Most games nowadays are like, you want to check the manual out? You've got to go to this website. You can check the manual out, which I feel is incredibly lacking. Of like, well, what's the point? What's just don't do the website. I would stick it in the box or just you know don't bother. Um, sorry, my eyes are starting to sting. Don't know why. Oh god, stingy eyes. I'm tired as well. There's a lot to talk about. It tires you out. So anyway, moving on to the games. So the game I just had in my hands, the game I was looking at for the manual, is Transformers: Fall of Cybertron, which is the second game in the Transformers series. I played the first one on the Xbox, which was War for Cybertron. I loved it. I love Transformers, and I love Transformers games. Grew up on the cartoons, and being able to play as Optimus Prime, as Megatron, as Starscream, as Jetfire, as a Jazz, Grimlock. Being able to play as these characters was a dream come true. True. Get my words out. A dream come true growing up, and then being able to uh, have control and be part of their world on their war for Cybertron. All the things that I never really got to see while playing, while watching the TV show. Being actually be a part of it is an amazing experience. I haven't completed it yet. I bought it quite recently. It's a quite expensive game because they never made. There were plans to make a third Transformers game by High Moon Studios, by Activision, but they never got around to doing it. I think Activision in the end was just like, no, we're going to put you on doing Call of Duty, and that's basically what High Moon Studios have done. I think it was either this game, Transformers, or it was Deadpool. One of them. I think it was Deadpool. I think Deadpool was the last game that High Moon Studios made that wasn't a Call of Duty game. Which I mentioned Deadpool earlier. Deadpool was a fantastic game that I recently went back and experienced that I missed out on. So I'm currently going through High Moon Studios games at the moment, just remembering how good they used to be, and they probably still are good. And hopefully they can get the license back because I want another next gen Transformers game because I feel like it really we really need a Transformers game. I think not as Xbox in general. I think the gaming space just needs a new Transformers game, a decent Transformers game, and these games were decent games. The next one is Max Payne 3, made by Rockstar. Another one that I missed out on growing up, but I remember seeing it and seeing how amazing the bullet effects are, and being able to jump around and do loads of weird sort of like gunjitsu as you play as Max Payne. This is another one that I struggled to find, but I managed to find it. Because Transformers, like I said, Transformers is quite rare, and that was a really expensive game, and I managed to get it for like £11. It was the cheapest I could find it, which I didn't mind paying it, but at the same stage it was like it was either pay the cheapest price you could find, or pay out the nose for it. So I was like, no, I'm going to pay cheaper. I think Max Payne was £12.50 at CEX. Again, that was the cheapest I could find it. Playing for an experience that this game comes with 2 discs and has a huge manual. Trying to pull the manual out now. Hold on a second. It has a huge manual, and it's all color. It's all different, like bits of like actual shots of in-game play, what it would look while you're playing in the game. There's a concept art as well as going through the different features, multiplayer, and so that's what I used to enjoy. That's one of the things I used to do when I used to put my game in. The game would be loading up. I would pull out the manual, and I would just flick through the manual of like looking at the pictures, looking at like the bits of lore, the bits of the story, filling in the gaps of what's been going on between Max Payne 2 and Max Payne 3. Which I'll be honest, I've never played Max Payne 1 or 2. I know I jumped straight to number 3, but again, Max Payne 1 or 2 are now backwards compatible on the Xbox One, so I could, if I wanted to, I could go back and play Max Payne 1 and 2. So I have that option. And again, it's all about having the option of, like, if you wanted to jump in and just play Max Payne 3 or Mass Effect 3, you could, but you can also go back and play Mass Effect 1 and 2 or Max Payne 1 and 2. It's having the freedom of not just being like, oh well, the only one that's backwards compatible is the third one. I can't play 1 and 2. You now have the freedom to be like, well, you know what, I can start from the beginning and work my way up. Like, for example, Crisis 1 has been added to backwards compatible. I never played Crisis 1. I started on Crisis 2. So now having the option to go back and play Crisis 1 and play all the series all the way through is a really nice thought. It's a really nice feeling, which one of the things I'd like to do soon, hopefully, if I can get through all of these games. Because I've played Crisis 2. I haven't played, well, I played a little bit at the beginning of Crisis 3. But just being able to play them all seamlessly will be a really, really nice thing to do, which I hope to do in the future. But coming back to Max Payne, it's really funny. There's the thing in the back coming soon, Grand Theft Auto 5. I just remembered the ideas of Grand Theft Auto 5. It says here how you can start a crew, start a gang in Max Payne 3, and then once trying to get my words out. Once GTA 5 comes out, you can then transfer your crew over to a GTA 5, which I think that's kind of incredible. If I had played Max Payne 3, I probably would have done that, which I did kind of do in a way. Me and my friends had a little bit of a crew on GTA 5 when we used to play it back in the day. We've all kind of grown up now, and we don't really play GTA anymore. But that's really cool, how the idea, like, you can play one game and being like, well, if you want, just transfer everything over and you can just keep playing in GTA. But yeah, this shows how old this game is. This game, hold on a second, this game was 2012. There's a lot of great games coming out in 2012. But again, it's those little details, those little things in the backs of the manuals that you just don't get nowadays, sadly. Final game that I've got with me that I want to talk about, which I actually bought this one quite recently. I bought this one over the weekend on the Sunday. I watched, what did I watch? What was it? It was the new Triple X movie, The Return of Xander Cage, I think it was called. It was an alright film. It wasn't great, but it was fine. But as I was watching, I remember, I remember Riddick, and I remember how good Riddick was. Then I remember that there was a video game that came out for Riddick back in the day on the 360. Never played it. Always heard good things about it. That it was one of the best stealth video games on the 360 ever. Probably. Well, I wouldn't say if it was better than Assassin's Creed, but for 2009, this was classed as the best stealth game on the 360, and probably one of the best action games for quite a while. Because well, that's what it says on the back anyway. I don't know if that's true or not. But it's the Chronicles of Riddick: Assault on Dark Athena. One of the reasons that really hooked me about this game and why I wanted to get it, because you're not just getting one, you're getting two games in one. You're also getting Escape from Butcher Bay, which was the 2004 game that came out for the original Xbox, which again, it was another game I never played. And so you get the new Dark Athena game as well as the old game. So now, as an achievement hunter, that just rings bells of like double achievements for two different games. But also the idea that I get to experience two old games for the price of one. This was £3.50 to get. Again, was the cheapest I could find it anywhere. Anywhere else I looked was just expensive. But again, this is a game by Universal. And High Moon Studios made Transformers. These two games, I would say the reason why they can't be backwards compatible is because licenses, having to pay Vin Diesel for his likeness and for his voice, having to pay for the rights to Riddick on a new system, having to pay Universal, and Universal having to pay them, and it's a lot of wishy-washy. Activision having to pay Hasbro for the license just for one game and not actually making a brand new game, but just re-releasing an old game. There's a lot of money involved, and I don't blame a lot of companies for going, I ain't paying that. I'm not paying those prices to reinstate those licenses just so we don't make a new game and make more money, just so we can relaunch an older game. Some companies will, some companies won't. It depends on how much the license is, how much basically hassle goes into it. I can imagine with the Chronicles of Riddick game that having to pay Vin Diesel for his likeness and for his voice and for his IP, probably a lot of money. So it's probably like it's not worth putting it on backwards compatible. Luckily, I have a 360, so I can just go back and play on the 360. But this is kind of the idea. This is the, like I said, the downside about it is the fact of you have these great games that I never got to experience, which I can experience now on the 360. I just can't experience them on the newer consoles because they just won't work, which is the sad part about it, and which is kind of what I was trying to get at the point of this podcast, this episode, was that we need to start looking into preserving video games and why it's important that games be preserved. And the idea of, it's all well and good collecting older games and playing them on the older consoles, but eventually those older consoles will eventually pack up, will eventually not work. Luckily my old Xbox, my original Xbox, the Xbox original, the first one, still works, but because we had it in good condition. But there will come a day where eventually something will happen and something will break, or the power pack will not work, and then I won't be able to get replacement parts, or having to go out and buy a brand new Xbox. And eventually the world will run out of old Xboxes to the point of where would you be able to get one? Where'd you be able to get parts for them? You know what I mean? So it's a worrying thought for the future. Currently now it's not much of a worry, but eventually for the future those things will become unavailable. And so having been able to play these games on newer consoles is what's important. Currently I have I hope they'd come for the day of actually recording this, but they haven't come yet. But I have on order Prototype 1 and 2. Two games again I missed out on. I love a sandbox game. I love games where you just kind of like you hack and slash sandbox games. That's what Prototype 1 and 2 are. So again, two games I never got to experience. They did remaster, or say remaster. They did kind of repackage them and try to sell them again on the newer consoles. But they want like 35 quid for each, or you could spend upwards of like 50 to 55 pounds for them both. And I was like, no. Not just that, I've read in the reviews for the remaster of the first Prototype that when they remastered it, the game is basically broken. That they've basically made it worse, and that there are issues in it that didn't even show up in the original game. So, kind of worrying. So that kind of put me off wanting to get it. So I thought, you know what, it was £5.60 for both games on Amazon. I was like, you know what, screw it, I'll buy it. Again, those two games, I hope, when Microsoft acquires Activision, that the backwards compatibility rights for a lot of these older games will come back, and that they'll say, like, put them on Game Pass, and then more people can experience them. Hopefully by then I've played them, so it won't be the same. But people who won't have an Xbox, who won't have the ability to go out and buy them for their Xbox 360, if they even have one anymore, will be able to experience them on their newer consoles. And this is what I'm trying to God, I had that word and I lost it. This is what I'm trying to say, and what I'm trying to explain is that why it's so important to have preservation, to make sure that these games will stand the test of time. And this is what I'm trying to get at. Like, older games, because of licenses and because of agreements, they don't last very long. And the idea that if a game comes out nowadays, in the licensing agreement, you put something in the licenses of, like, the license will run out on said date, but if we want to, make sure that we can have it backwards compatible, that is a viable option. That is an option that we can take. That, the licensee, the persons who it belongs to, will agree to say, yeah, the license will run out in like the next 10 to 20 years. But that doesn't mean that the game still can't be used and reused and sold. After that, you just can't make any more games with the IP after said date. So it's just the idea of making sure that games last forever. That just because a licensing agreement has ended doesn't mean you can no longer use, said game on the newer consoles, which it does at the moment. But in these new laws and in the new agreements and the new preservation that's being put into video games now, that won't be an issue. So that's it. So that's basically what I'm trying to get at, and what I'm trying to say is that we need to protect games, and that we need to make sure that this art form lasts forever. Because it's all well and good having brand new games, it's all well and good having the next Call of Duty, having the next Halo, having the next Assassin's Creed. It's all well and good having these brand new games to experience, but I feel like we should look back on what made gaming what it is now. Like, we should look back on what started it all, and that we should not just have to look back, but also go look back and still be able to play, still be able to experience. I know with PC that it's this is not really an issue on PC. The licensing is still an issue on PC. Like, if you don't already own the game, there's a high potentiality that you can't buy it digitally. But if you have a portable disk drive, or if your monitor, monitor, if you've got an all-in-one, or if your computer has a disk drive built in. I have an external one that I connect through a USB. But if you have the old discs, you can play them. Like, I was looking in getting, what was it now? Harry Potter, the original Harry Potter game, because I remember my dad having that on a floppy disk. So having the old original Harry Potter game and then just being able to play that on my PC would be nice. The issue there comes with finding an emulator, finding a piece of software that will run the game, because the issue being is that old PC games won't run on modern PCs, because old games used to use, like, depending how old on them, they used to be able to run on Vista and other Windows engines, but obviously won't run on the modern operating engines because it's too new. And again, this is the issue with PCs, that if you can get it digitally, which is great, but most older games don't work with newer computers because they're just too new. So it is somewhat of an issue with PC, but I think it's mostly important with consoles. With consoles, it's because they're more accessible to majority of people. That's why it's more important to make sure that games are preserved on there, more so. So that's my topic. That's what I'm trying to talk about. So let's get to the end. Let's get to finishing this podcast off, shall we? So if you made it this far to the end, thank you. Thank you for making it this far. So I just want to apologise if I seem a bit off or seem a bit quiet or weird at times. My mum is currently at home, so it is very awkward knowing that you are being listened to, that someone can hear you. My mum knows that I podcast, but I'm very used to doing it when there's nobody in the house. So having somebody here is very awkward. So that's why there are moments where I've had to stop recording because she's called me or she's asked me to do something. I'm like, Mom, I'm recording, you know. So it's very awkward. So I apologise for having to stop, start, and seem a bit confused and seem a bit off. It's because I'm on track. I know what I'm going to say. I know what I'm going to do, and then I get called to do something, and I'm having to go do that, come back, and having to be like, okay, what was I talking about? So that's why I kept repeating myself and saying things because I was just having to stop. Real nightmare. So if you've lasted this long, thank you for getting this far. It means obviously it means a lot to me. If you listen to last week's episode, well, say last week's, the last episode's side quest that came out late on the Monday. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to do side quests this week, mainly because, well, to be honest, I haven't actually. There's nothing really happened much in the game in space, or there's not much happened in like Star Wars. Boba Fett is over, so there's not much going on at the moment currently for me to talk about. So there might not be one this week. Maybe next week, see what happens. But I hope people enjoyed this episode. One of the things that one of the biggest key points that I keep telling myself, and one of the key points I tell anybody who wants to do a podcast, is that talk about what you love, talk about what you're passionate about, talk about something that you care about, and then kind of stay away from the things that you're not interested in. Stay away from the crap. And I'm very much interested in game preservation, and it's something that I've been doing quite a lot quite recently. Like I said, prototype 1 and 2 are on the way. They should have been here by yesterday, but I think they didn't come. Probably a delay. So, however, today or tomorrow, fingers crossed. But I'm still currently playing through Transformers: Fall of Cybertron, which I'm really loving and enjoying, and that so I've got to play that one, and then I've got to play through Max Payne 3. Still playing that. That's backwards compatible, so I'm playing that on my Xbox, so I don't need to play it on the 360. And then I got to play through Chronicles of Riddick, and then I've got to play through Prototype 1 and 2. Hopefully by then they'll be here. And then I've got to go play through Crisis 1, then play Crisis 2, and then Crisis 3. So it's quite a lot. I haven't got to do it. I know I keep saying I've got to do it, but I ain't got to do it. But I want to do it. These are games that I missed out on, so I want to experience them. And also the fact of being an achievement hunter, somebody who loves achievements. The idea of playing all these games and getting loads of achievements out of it is a really fantastic, feeling. So I'm really quite excited for what to play next and to keep going. Like I'm really enjoying my time with Transformers, and that more I play it, the more I'm like I really want a next gen Transformers game. Like I keep thinking of what a next gen Transformers game would look like. What kind of features. Because playing through Transformers: Fall of Cybertron, played it on the 360. It's HD, and I'm not saying like the game looks crap. The game looks pretty good. Top of the range, top of the model. Back in the day when the 360 was out, maybe I've just my eyes have gotten better at noticing, higher frames and better graphics. But there have been moments where I've played Transformers, and there have been times where the frame rate will drop and like a character's face. So like you'll have this really detailed body, but a very smooth face with just two weird looking eyes and a mouth. Everything else is just smooth, and then every now it'll just pop in. The graphics and textures will pop in, and then you have a really detailed face. It's not immersion breaking, of course not, but it's very sort of funny. It's silly, and again, these are the enjoyments of playing older games. Of like, oh god, I remember when games used to do that. Like modern games do it as well, but it's just when it happens so much on older games and older software, when you can tell a game's really pushing the engine, really pushing the power of a place of the Xbox 360. When you notice of like, oh god, that's quite cute, quite nice to see. Back in the day, it was probably an issue for somebody, but for me, it's a nice form of nostalgia. Of like, oh yeah, I remember when games used to do that a lot. Um, so yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this topic, even if you're a gamer or not. That you enjoyed my passion for gaming and what I was talking about, and yeah, spread the word. Let people know. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate. It really helps because the higher rating I am, the higher on the list I go, and then more people can listen to the podcast. And just That's what I want at the end of that. I just want more people to listen to me ramble about crap. Well, I don't think it's crap, but most people probably would. But the point is, I want people to listen to the crap I have to say. You know, if you're on Twitter, remember to follow me on Twitter if you're not already. The Ginger Bookworm, or at @bookginger_ginger, and you'll find me quite easy. It's the same picture that I've got here. So I think that's everything. So yeah, Twitter, rate me on Spotify, or if you're listening to me on the Anchor app, I think there's a rating system on there. If not, then don't worry about it. Just spread the word. Let everybody know what I'm doing here. You know, it means a lot to me, the people who listen. So that's all. That's all I've got time for. That's all I've got to say. Really, I'm running out of things to say now, so I'm going to end. Don't forget to subscribe, to like, and all that jazz, and spread the word. And yeah, so as always, stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace, and thank you for listening to this week's episode of Nerdstalgic with me, your host Luke, the Ginger Bookworm.